Captain Alex Harrison had negotiated with some of the galaxy's most dangerous species, but nothing had prepared him for war leader Zara-Th. She entered the abandoned station's conference room like a force of nature, her 7-foot frame moving with predatory grace that made every human instinct scream warnings about apex predators. Her people, the Kithra, were built for war, dense muscle and bone structure that could survive impacts that would pulverize humans, skin with a metallic sheen that could deflect small-caliber rounds, and reflexes fast enough to snatch projectiles from the air. But it was her eyes that held Harrison's attention, golden, intelligent, and absolutely furious. "So," Zara-Th said in accented standard, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the station's metal walls, "the humans send another soft-flesh diplomat to waste my time with empty words." Harrison remained seated, a calculated insult that he hoped would provoke her into revealing more than she intended. "War leader Zara-Th. Thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. I'm Captain Harrison, and I'm here to find a solution that serves both our people's interests. Your people's interests seem to involve stealing Kithra's sacred ground and calling it diplomacy." She remained standing, looming over the conference table in a display of physical dominance that probably worked on most species. "Previous humans have made many promises. All lies. Previous humans weren't me." Harrison pulled up a holographic display of the disputed territory. "I've spent the last 6 months studying Kithra culture, your people's needs, and the specific significance of the Kepler Delta region. I know this isn't just about land." Zara-Th's golden eyes narrowed. Most humans, she'd learned, barely researched alien customs beyond basic etiquette. "What do you think you know about Kithra needs, soft flesh? I know that your homeworld's ecosystem is failing. I know your people require specific mineral supplements that are rare in most systems but abundant in Kepler Delta. I know that sacred hunting ground is a translation that doesn't capture the full spiritual and practical significance of territory that provides both sustenance and cultural continuity." The silence stretched between them, filled with the subtle sounds of the station's failing life support systems. Zara-Th's expression shifted from dismissive anger to something approaching surprise. "You have done your research," she admitted grudgingly. "But research does not change facts. Your colonists have built on ground that has belonged to my clan for 16 generations. They have driven away prey animals that feed our young and disturbed mineral deposits that maintain our health. And our colonists have invested their life savings in farms and businesses, raised children who know no other home, and built communities that represent their own form of cultural continuity." Harrison leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "Both sides have legitimate claims and real needs. The question is whether we can find a solution that honors both, or whether we're going to let this turn into another war that solves nothing." Zara-Th circled the table slowly, her movement carrying the fluid menace of a hunter evaluating prey. "Wars solve many things, Captain. They determine who is strong enough to hold what they claim. And they also determine who has children left to inherit what remains after the killing stops." Harrison's voice carried a note of personal pain that made Zara-Th pause mid-stride. "I've seen what war costs, war leader. Have you?" "I have led my people through 7 territorial conflicts," she replied, but her tone had shifted from mockery to something more thoughtful. "I know the price of both victory and defeat. Then you know that sometimes the strongest choice is finding an alternative to fighting." Zara-Th completed her circle and stood directly across from Harrison, her hands resting on the table in a way that displayed both her ceremonial weapons and her capacity for violence. "Your species speaks of alternatives while your colonists prepare defenses and call for military support. Some of them are, yes. Just as I suspect some of your warriors are sharpening blades and composing death songs." Harrison's mild tone took the sting out of the observation. "The question is whether we're going to let the extremists on both sides dictate the outcome, or whether we're going to be smart enough to disappoint them." For the first time since entering the room, Zara-Th's expression showed something that might have been amusement. "You speak of disappointing warriors as if it were a worthy goal, human. I speak of disappointing warmongers as if peace were worth the effort." Harrison stood, bringing himself closer to her impressive height but still requiring him to look up to meet her eyes. "War Leader, I'm not here to trick you or waste your time. I'm here because both our peoples need a solution, and I believe we're smart enough to find one if we stop posturing long enough to actually try." The challenge in his words hung between them like a blade. Most humans, Zara-Th knew, became nervous when she moved into their personal space, but Harrison seemed genuinely unaffected by her intimidation tactics. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain Harrison. Probably both. But I'm also very stubborn, and I don't give up on problems that can be solved through thinking instead of killing." He smiled, and Zara-Th was surprised to find it wasn't the weak expression she'd expected from human diplomats. "Besides, if you were going to kill me for impudence, you'd have done it already. The fact that we're still talking suggests you're curious about what I might propose." Zara-Th's laugh was like metal striking stone, harsh but not entirely unfriendly. "Perhaps I am simply enjoying the novelty of a human who doesn't immediately offer meaningless concessions and beg for mercy. Meaningless concessions help no one, and begging is generally ineffective with people who respect strength more than submission." Harrison returned to his seat, a gesture that somehow managed to be both relaxed and confident. "Shall we discuss what each side actually needs, or would you prefer to continue the intimidation dance? Because I should warn you, I have excellent stamina and a very high tolerance for dramatic posturing." Despite herself, Zara-Th found her anger cooling into something that felt almost like respect. This human was not what she had expected. "Very well, Captain Harrison," she said, settling into the chair. 3 days into negotiations, Harrison had learned that arguing with Zara-Th was like sparring with a master swordsman, exhausting, educational, and oddly exhilarating. She challenged every assumption, questioned every proposal, and demonstrated a strategic mind that could have commanded fleets as easily as warrior bands. "Your resource-sharing proposal is flawed," she said, manipulating the holographic display to highlight weaknesses in his latest suggestion. "You assume Kithra needs can be met with synthetic alternatives, but our physiology requires specific molecular structures found only in natural minerals." "Fair point," Harrison acknowledged, making notes on his tablet. "What if we modified the extraction process to preserve those molecular structures while still allowing human agricultural development in non-mineral zones?" "Possible, but it would require Kithra oversight of all mining operations. Your people would need to accept alien authority in matters they consider their expertise. Some of them, sure. Others might see it as an opportunity to learn advanced mineral processing techniques from a species that's been doing it for millennia." Zara-Th paused in her manipulation of the display, golden eyes studying Harrison with renewed interest. "You speak of learning from Kithra as if it were desirable rather than shameful. Why would it be shameful? Your people have survived in environments that would kill most humans within hours. You've developed technologies that work in harmony with natural systems instead of fighting them. That's not just impressive, it's something we could benefit from understanding." The war leader was quiet for a moment, and Harrison caught a glimpse of something vulnerable in her expression before her warrior's mask slipped back into place. "Most species view Kithra methods as primitive because we do not build vast cities or reshape worlds to suit our comfort. Most species are idiots," Harrison said bluntly, earning a startled look. "Sorry, that was unprofessional. But seriously, the ability to live sustainably within an ecosystem instead of destroying it isn't primitive, it's advanced. Your people have achieved something most civilizations never figure out. You approve of Kithra ways?" There was something in her voice that made Harrison look up from his notes. Zara-Th was watching him with an intensity that felt personal rather than professional. "I approve of wisdom wherever I find it," he said carefully. "And from what I've learned about Kithra culture, your people have developed solutions to problems that still plague most of the galaxy. Such as resource management that doesn't lead to environmental collapse. Social structures that prioritize community survival over individual accumulation. Conflict resolution that focuses on honor rather than annihilation." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Though I admit I'm still trying to understand the honor concepts. Some of them seemed designed to make negotiations more complicated. Zara-Th's laugh was genuinely amused this time. Honor is not designed for the convenience of diplomats, Captain. It exists to preserve what makes us Kithra when survival pressures would otherwise force us to become something else. Explain that? She was quiet for a long moment, clearly debating how much to reveal. My people are dying, she said finally. Not from war or disease, but from slow erosion of everything that defines us. Our homeworld changes, forcing us to adapt our ways or face extinction. Other species offer us technology, medicine, new worlds, but only if we abandon our traditions and become more like them. Harrison felt pieces clicking into place. So maintaining honor codes isn't just about cultural preservation. It's about species preservation. Yes. But honor without resources is merely a way to die with dignity. Zara-Th's voice carried the weight of impossible choices. The minerals in Kepler Delta could extend my people's survival by generations. Without them, you're choosing between cultural extinction and literal extinction. Exactly. She looked out through the station's viewport at the stars beyond. Which is why these negotiations matter more than simple territorial disputes. They determine whether the Kithra have a future. The revelation reframed everything Harrison thought he understood about the conflict. Zara-Th, why didn't previous negotiations include this information? Because revealing weakness to enemies is not the Kithra way, she said simply. Better to fight and die as warriors than beg and live as slaves. But you're telling me you are not behaving as an enemy. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did Harrison. You ask questions about our culture as if our answers matter for reasons beyond tactical advantage. You speak of learning from us as if we had something valuable to offer. Harrison found himself studying her profile as she watched the stars, the sharp angles of her alien features, the way her metallic skin caught and reflected light, the almost military precision with which she held herself even in casual conversation. You do have something valuable to offer, he said quietly. The question is whether my people are smart enough to recognize it. Zara-Th turned back to face him, and for a moment the space between them felt charged with possibilities neither quite understood. And if they are not? Then we find a way to make them understand. Or we work around them until they catch up. Harrison met her gaze directly. One thing I've learned in this job, sometimes the best solutions come from people who refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable. Even when those people are from different species with conflicting needs. Especially then. Different perspectives see different possibilities. The silence that followed felt different from their previous verbal sparring, less adversarial, more contemplative. Harrison found himself aware of details he'd been too focused on negotiations to notice before, the way Zara-Th's breathing had a slightly different rhythm than humans, the subtle play of expression across features that were alien but increasingly familiar. Captain Harrison, Zara-Th said finally, may I ask a personal question? Sure. Why do you do this work? Negotiating with hostile species in dangerous situations seems unpleasant for someone who could choose safer assignments. Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. I lost my family in a colony raid 8 years ago. Pirates, probably, though we never found out for certain. For a while, I thought about hunting them down, making them pay for what they'd taken from me. That would be the Kithra response. Yeah, well, I'm not Kithra. Revenge wouldn't bring them back, and it wouldn't prevent other families from going through the same thing. Harrison's voice was steady, but Zara-Th could hear the old pain underneath. But preventing conflicts, finding ways for different groups to coexist instead of destroying each other, that might actually save lives. So you choose to help strangers rather than avenge family? I choose to honor my family by making sure other people don't have to lose theirs. Harrison looked at her directly. Though I'm starting to think you and I might not be strangers much longer. The comment hung between them, its meaning ambiguous but its intent clear. Zara-Th felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest, not the warrior's respect for a worthy opponent, but something warmer and more dangerous. That could be problematic, she said carefully. Could be, Harrison agreed. Or it could be exactly what we need to solve this mess. Outside the viewport, Harrison woke to emergency alerts screaming through the abandoned station's communication system. The timestamp showed 0347 hours, and the automated distress signals painted a picture of disaster that made his blood run cold. Unauthorized military action in Kepler Delta Sector, the mechanical voice announced. Human forces have engaged Kithra defensive positions. Casualties confirmed on both sides. He found Zara Th in the conference room, standing rigid before a holographic display that showed the aftermath of what could only be described as a massacre. Her people's outpost, a small research facility monitoring mineral extraction, had been attacked without warning by a group of human colonists using stolen military equipment. 12 of my warriors are dead, she said without turning around, her voice carrying a resonance that made the station's hull vibrate. Including Kethral, my second-in-command, and Velterra, who was barely past her naming ceremony. Harrison felt sick. Zara Th, I had nothing to do with this. I've been here with you, working on nothing. She spun to face him, and Harrison saw something in her golden eyes that hadn't been there before, raw grief mixed with killing rage. While we played at diplomacy, your people planned murder. My people? Harrison's own anger flared. Those colonists acted without authorization, against explicit orders from colonial command. I tried to warn the settlement leaders that unauthorized action would destroy any chance of. Warning means nothing when the warned choose to ignore it. Zara Th moved toward him with predatory purpose, her hand dropping to the ceremonial blade at her side. You spoke of alternatives to war while your species prepared for war. Some of them prepared for war despite everything I've tried to do to prevent it. Harrison stood his ground as she approached, though every instinct screamed at him to retreat from the barely leashed violence in her posture. Just as I'm betting some of your warriors are right now composing revenge songs and sharpening weapons, despite everything you've done to give negotiations a chance. Do not presume to understand Kithra grief. The blade cleared its sheath with a sound like singing metal. You cannot comprehend what it means to lose clanmates to treachery disguised as peace. Can't I? Harrison's voice was quiet but carried its own edge. I told you about my family, Zara Th. I know exactly what it feels like to lose people you love to senseless violence. Then you know why this mockery of negotiation ends now. She raised the blade, not quite a threat, but no longer ceremonial display. My warriors demand blood for blood. The clan mothers call for the old ways. And I can no longer pretend that your species can be trusted. Harrison watched her struggle with emotions that were tearing her apart. Duty to her people, personal grief, the rage of a warrior who had tried diplomacy and seen it fail spectacularly. What do you need from me? He asked quietly. I need you to leave. Return to your colonies and tell them that Zara Th of the Stormwind clan gave them one chance for peace, and they chose to answer with murder. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. Tell them that what follows is justice, not aggression. And then what? You attack the colonies, they call for military reinforcement, and we have the war that destroys both our peoples. Better than slow death through failed diplomacy and betrayed trust. Harrison looked at her, this magnificent, deadly being who had spent days patiently working through impossible problems, only to have extremists from both sides destroy everything they'd built together. There has to be another way, he said. There is no other way. Zara Th's control finally snapped, grief and fury pouring out in words that came too fast for the universal translator to follow properly. When she switched back to standard, her voice was raw with pain. I believed you, Harrison. I believed that your people could learn to see beyond their own needs, that they could value Kithra lives as more than obstacles to be removed. I was wrong. You weren't wrong about me. You are one person among millions. What good is your understanding when your species acts with such casual cruelty? She was right, and they both knew it. Harrison's respect for Kithra culture meant nothing if human colonists were going to murder her people whenever diplomacy seemed inconvenient. "Let me contact Colonial Command," he said desperately. "Let me see if I can get the perpetrators arrested, brought to justice through human law." Human justice for Kithra dead? Zarath's laugh was bitter. "Your people will call it self-defense, claim they were protecting their families from alien threats. The killers will receive light sentences or pardons, and my warriors will learn that human law considers Kithra lives worthless." Again, she was probably right. Harrison had seen enough colonial justice to know that human courts rarely convicted humans for crimes against aliens, especially when the aliens were seen as threatening human settlements. "Then what do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to leave," she repeated, but there was something in her voice that suggested the opposite. "I want you to go back to your people and forget that we ever tried to find alternatives to war." Harrison studied her face, reading the conflict between what she was saying and what she actually wanted. "Is that really what you want?" "It's what must happen." She turned away from him, but not before he caught the glitter of tears in her golden eyes. "The Kithra way demands blood for blood. I cannot ask my people to accept peace with those who murder us while we sleep. Even if it means extinction for both our species. Even then." The finality in her voice should have ended the conversation, but Harrison found himself moving closer rather than backing away. Something about her posture, the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she held her blade like a shield against her own emotions, told him that her warrior's resolve was costing her more than she could afford. "Zarath," he said gently, "you don't have to do this alone." "Do what alone?" "Carry the responsibility for your entire people's survival. Make impossible choices between honor and extinction." He reached out, almost touching her shoulder before catching himself. "Find solutions that satisfy everyone when the extremists on both sides are determined to make it impossible. Those are the burdens of leadership," she said without turning around. "I accepted them when I took the war leader's mark. And you've carried them brilliantly. But even the strongest warriors need allies. I have no allies among your species. You have me." The words hung between them, a declaration that changed everything. Zarath turned to face him, blade still in her hand, tears now flowing openly down her metallic cheeks. "You cannot be my ally in this, Harrison. Your people killed mine. Honor demands." "Honor demands that you do what's right for your people's survival," Harrison interrupted. "And right now, what's right is finding a way to stop this from escalating into total war. Even if it means betraying the memory of my fallen warriors. Even if it means being strong enough to choose their sacrifices meaning." Harrison took another step closer, close enough now that Zarath could kill him with a simple thrust of her blade. They died because extremists couldn't accept the possibility of peace. Don't let their deaths become an excuse for more extremism. "One more step," Zarath whispered, her voice shaking with emotion, "one more touch, and I'll kill you. I cannot be seen as weak, cannot be known as the war leader who chose humans over Kithra honor." Harrison looked into her eyes and saw desperation, grief. The blade clattered to the deck as Zarath crumpled, her warrior's composure finally breaking under the weight of impossible grief. Harrison caught her before she could fall completely, his arms wrapping around her powerful frame as she shook with sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered against his shoulder, her voice muffled and raw. "I can't keep choosing between honor and survival, between tradition and necessity. Every choice leads to death, my people's death, your people's death, my own death from the inside out." Harrison held her tightly, feeling the tremors that ran through her body as years of suppressed emotion poured out. "You don't have to choose alone," he said quietly. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. Your people murdered mine," she said, but without the earlier fury, just exhausted pain. "How can we work together after that? Because those people don't represent all humans any more than you represent all Kithra. Harrison's hand found the back of her neck, his fingers gentle against the sensitive spot where her metallic skin met softer tissue. There are extremists on both sides who want war, but there are also people on both sides who want their children to survive. Zara Th pulled back slightly to look at him, her golden eyes still bright with tears. The clan mothers will demand vengeance. The warrior lodges sing for blood. How do I tell them that their war leader chooses to ally with the species that killed our young? You tell them that their war leader is smart enough to know the difference between justice and revenge, and strong enough to choose the path that leads to survival rather than glorious extinction. And if they refuse to follow such a path, then you show them a better way. Harrison cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears that sparkled like liquid metal. Zara Th, in the past week I've watched you analyze impossible problems, find flaws in every solution, and then rebuild those solutions into something stronger. You're not just a warrior, you're a strategist, a leader, and probably the smartest person I've ever negotiated with. Flattery will not solve the political reality. It's not flattery, it's recognition. Harrison's voice was firm. You've been carrying the burden of your people's survival alone because you thought that was what leadership meant. But leadership also means knowing when to trust others, when to build alliances, when to risk everything on the possibility that cooperation might achieve what isolation cannot. Zara Th studied his face, searching for something she wasn't sure how to name. You touched me, she said finally. Twice. After I threatened your life. I did. Why? Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because you needed to know that someone was willing to risk everything to prove that trust was still possible. Because sometimes the most important communication happens through touch rather than words. And because I care about you too much to let you face this crisis alone, even if it means risking my life to prove it. The admission hung between them like a bridge across impossible distance. Zara Th's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that looked like wonder. You care about me. More than I probably should, considering the circumstances. Harrison's smile was rueful. Though I have to admit, falling for someone who could literally kill me with her bare hands wasn't part of my original negotiation strategy. Despite everything, Zara Th found herself laughing, not the bitter sound from earlier, but something approaching genuine amusement. Your species has very strange mating protocols. Wait, are we talking about mating protocols now? Because I should warn you, human courtship rituals are nowhere near as elegant as they appear in the diplomatic manuals. I was not aware that human diplomats were trained in courtship rituals. We're not, which explains why I'm probably doing this all wrong. Harrison's expression grew more serious. Zara Th, I know this is complicated. I know there are cultural barriers and political ramifications and about a million reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I also know that you're extraordinary, and that working with you has been the best part of an impossible situation. Even when I threatened to kill you. Especially then. Anyone can be charming when things are going well. It takes real character to maintain dignity and strength when everything is falling apart. Harrison's hands were still framing her face, and he found himself memorizing the details. The way her tears caught light, the subtle patterns in her metallic skin, the intelligence that made her eyes so compelling. You didn't break when your people were killed. You didn't abandon your principles when extremists made them inconvenient. And you didn't strike me when grief and honor demanded violence. Perhaps I should have. Perhaps. But the fact that you didn't tells me everything I need to know about who you really are beneath the warrior's armor. And what am I, Harrison? You're someone who chooses mercy when strength would be easier. Someone who carries the weight of her entire species' future but still has room in her heart for individual compassion. His voice was soft but certain. You're someone worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a future with. Zara Th closed her eyes, leaning into his touch as if drawing strength from the contact. When she opened them again, her expression had changed, less grief, more determination. If we do this, she said carefully, if we try to build something from the wreckage of failed diplomacy and murdered hopes, what would it look like? I don't know. But I have some ideas. Harrison released her face but kept one hand on her shoulder, the touch grounding for both of them. Joint response teams to handle the extremists on both sides. Shared investigation into the attack to ensure real justice. Integration of Kithra mineral expertise with human agricultural technology. And us? Us? Harrison smiled. We become living proof that cooperation is possible. We show both our peoples that the choice isn't between conquest and extinction, it's between isolation and alliance. The political complications would be immense. Probably. Your people will question your loyalty to Kithra interests. Mine will question whether I've been compromised by personal attachment. Harrison shrugged. But we'll face those complications together, and we'll solve them the same way we've solved everything else, by being stubborn, creative, and absolutely refusing to accept failure. Zara Th picked up her blade from where it had fallen, studying the ceremonial weapon that had nearly ended their conversation permanently. This blade has been carried by war leaders of my clan for 12 generations, she said. Each one faced impossible choices between honor and survival. And what did they choose? Different things, depending on the circumstances. But all of them chose to put their people's future ahead of their personal comfort. She sheathed the blade with decisive finality. I choose alliance, Harrison. I choose to trust you, to work with you, to risk everything on the possibility that two species can learn to share the universe instead of fighting over it. Even if it costs you everything. Especially if it costs me everything. Because the alternative is watching my people die slowly while I preserve a tradition that no longer serves their needs. Zara Th stood, pulling Harrison up with her, their hands still intertwined. But I have conditions. Name them. First, the humans responsible for the attack face real justice, not human justice that excuses crimes against aliens, but actual consequences for their actions. Agreed. I'll work with Colonial Command to ensure proper prosecution. Second, any joint settlement arrangements include Kithra authority over mineral extraction and environmental management. My people's survival depends on specific resource management protocols. Makes sense. Your people have been doing this for centuries, we'd be foolish not to learn from your expertise. Third, 18 months later, Captain Alex Harrison stood at the edge of New Harmony's Central Plaza, watching human children and young Kithra engage in what appeared to be a heated debate about optimal soil composition for hybrid crops. The argument was being conducted in a mixture of standard, Kithra, and vigorous hand gestures, with occasional appeals to nearby adults for technical clarification. They're discussing whether the mineral supplements we use for traditional Kithra agriculture would benefit human root vegetables, Zara Th said, joining him with 2 cups of something that smelled like coffee but tasted infinitely better. Young Kithra is convinced that your potatoes would grow larger with our soil treatments. And she's probably right. Your people have been optimizing soil chemistry for longer than my species has been using tools. Harrison accepted the cup gratefully. Though I notice Tommy Chen is holding his own in the argument. 12-year-old humans are surprisingly stubborn when they believe they are correct about something. 12-year-old anythings are stubborn. It's one of the universal constants. Harrison watched the children, offspring of the joint colony's first generation, switch effortlessly between languages as they made their points. Hard to believe how natural this looks when you remember the political battles we had to fight to make it possible. The joint colony had been 2 years in the making, requiring negotiations with colonial authorities, Kithra clan councils, and half a dozen galactic regulatory bodies. The attack that had nearly ended their original negotiations had ultimately become the catalyst for something unprecedented, a formal alliance between species, mediated by 2 individuals who had learned to see past their differences. The memorial dedication is this afternoon, Zara Th said quietly, referring to the monument they'd erected to honor the Kithra warriors killed in the attack that had nearly destroyed everything. Are you prepared for your speech? As prepared as anyone can be for addressing the families of murder victims while standing next to the person they blamed for those murders. Harrison's voice carried old pain but also resolution. Though I notice they don't seem to blame you anymore. They have learned the difference between justice and vengeance, between honor and pride. Zareth's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. It helped that the humans responsible faced real consequences for their actions. The trials had been lengthy and complex, requiring new legal frameworks for prosecuting crimes that crossed species lines. But the convictions had sent a clear message: attacking aliens wasn't self-defense, and human courts would no longer pretend otherwise. Any word from the Council of War Leaders about the expansion proposal? Harrison asked. They approve, with modifications. 3 additional star systems have requested joint settlements based on our model. Zareth's smile carried satisfaction and no small amount of pride. It seems that success is more convincing than rhetoric. Success and the fact that our agricultural yields are 30% higher than either species achieved independently. Harrison squeezed her hand gently. Though I suspect the real convincing factor is watching our kids grow up bilingual and bicultural without losing their identity to either side. A commotion from the plaza drew their attention, not argument this time, but laughter as a group of children attempted to teach a young Kithra the finer points of soccer while simultaneously learning what appeared to be a traditional Kithra hunting game involving incredible feats of agility. Speaking of kids, Harrison said carefully, Valterra asked me an interesting question yesterday. Oh. She wanted to know when you and I were going to have children of our own, and whether they would be able to play both human and Kithra games. Zareth went very still. Cross-species reproduction was theoretically possible with genetic modification, but it remained a subject they'd carefully avoided discussing despite 18 months of partnership, both professional and personal. What did you tell her? I told her that such decisions required conversations between the adults involved, and that she should probably focus on mastering human mathematics before planning other people's reproductive choices. Wise deflection. Cowardly deflection. Because the truth is, I've been wanting to have that conversation for months but wasn't sure how to bring it up. Harrison turned to face her fully. Zareth, do you want children? With you? Well, I wasn't planning to shop around for alternative partners. Her laugh was the musical sound he'd learned to love, rich with harmonics that spoke of joy and affection. The genetic modifications required would be complex. The children would be unique, belonging fully to neither species and yet somehow to both. Like their parents. Like their parents, she agreed. And like this colony, something new that honors both origins while creating something unprecedented. Is that a yes? That is a yes, with the understanding that we are discussing hypothetical future children who would grow up in a universe where human-Kithra cooperation is normal rather than revolutionary. The universe is changing faster than we expected. By the time any hypothetical children are old enough to worry about such things, mixed colonies might be common throughout this sector. And by then, perhaps, the sight of human-Kithra partnerships will not cause diplomatic incidents and require extensive paperwork. Harrison grinned. You say that like the paperwork has been the hardest part of this relationship. The paperwork has been extensive, Zareth replied solemnly, then spoiled the effect by smiling. Though I admit that learning to share a bed with someone who generates significantly more heat than Kithra physiology considers optimal has presented its own challenges. I've been meaning to ask about that. Are you sure the temperature adjustment isn't bothering you? Harrison, I have spent 18 months learning to find human emotional expressions endearing instead of confusing, to appreciate the subtleties of human humor, and to tolerate your species' bizarre obsession with flavoring everything with caffeine. Zareth's grip on his hand tightened. A few degrees of temperature difference is hardly worth mentioning. Good. Because I've been learning to find Kithra directness refreshing instead of intimidating, to appreciate the elegance of your problem-solving approaches, and to understand that what I initially thought was aggression was actually a very sophisticated form of intellectual foreplay. Intellectual foreplay? All that challenging my assumptions and testing my reasoning? Very attractive, once I figured out what was happening. Zara Th's skin displayed patterns that Harrison had learned indicated amusement mixed with affection. I was not aware that rigorous logical analysis was considered seductive by human standards. Depends on the human and the quality of the analysis. Harrison pulled her closer, marveling as always at how perfectly they fit together despite the species difference. Though I should probably warn you, if we're going to discuss having children, there are certain human courtship rituals that traditionally precede such conversations. Such as formal declarations of permanent commitment. Ceremonies involving friends, family, and public promises about shared futures. Harrison's voice grew more serious. Such as marriage. The word hung between them with all its implications, not just personal commitment, but political statement, cultural bridge, and practical foundation for whatever they chose to build together. Marriage, Zara Th repeated, testing the concept. Human pair bonding with legal and social recognition. More or less. Though given our circumstances, we probably need to invent new ceremonies that honored both traditions. And you would want this? Permanent legal and social recognition of our partnership? I would want this. I would want everyone to know that Zara Th of the Stormwind clan chose to build her future with Alex Harrison of the Terran Colonial Service, and that together they created something neither could have achieved alone. Zara Th was quiet for a